Welcome everyone. Welcome everybody. We're still giving it a few minutes. I hear traffic is dense, and we have a few minutes more waiting. Thank you. It's just 3 minutes. I think we wait another 2 minutes. Let's not be too Prussian on this one.
It's not a big deal. Sorry, I was talking here to my muted phone.
I agree. Sure. Yeah, not a big deal. Can I ask where you are calling from, Sofia? Are you?
I'm in Vienna. I'm in Vienna. Yes. And you too?
I'm also in Vienna. Igor, you are in Berlin, I suppose?
Yeah, exactly. I'm in Berlin at the moment, and it's a very, very rainy weather outside. So I suppose that you've got a better weather in Vienna.
Yes.
Always.
Not always. But at least it's not so hot anymore. It was 30 degrees until yesterday, and we were all melting. Now it's a fresh breeze, but it's still very sunny, and you don't want to be out there.
So I've already given away the big pun that Sofia calling in from Brazil is actually calling from Vienna's 3rd district. Ah, Christina, fantastic.
Hi, I did it.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome,
nice
welcome everybody.
Sorry for the delay. There was an emergency here at my university, so I'm in the middle of a crisis, but okay.
I'm sorry to hear that. I hope people are fine. I hope you contributed to solving that. That's the bizarre thing with Zoom. One is all of a sudden in one's living room or office or whatsoever and jumping into lives. This we will do. We will now jump into the lives of our audience. Hopefully we will jump in your lives as well, into your work.
You give me a minute so that I can open my PowerPoint to have it ready to share screen later. Thank you.
You have more than 1 minute. Let me do a few brief minutes of talking and intro and context. I suppose I didn't say welcome officially yet. So welcome all. Welcome dear speakers. Welcome dear audience, live or later. My name is Robin Gosia, and I work as research associate at the Institute for the Danube Region and Central Europe, based in Vienna. This Zoom today, and I'm happy to say that, is with regard to the Jean Monnet project, From Fictional to Functioning Democracy, Developing Concepts and Strategies for an Inclusive and Participatory Europe, including an abbreviation. And this is also with support of the Erasmus Plus program of the European Union, and in cooperation with the Danube Region and Central, with the Danube Rectors Conference as well. So this series of talks is addressing current democratic developments within, and dare I say today, especially also interesting also outside the European Union. It's the fourth edition of this fourth, panel, Zoom of this kind. I called it Tackling Nationalism, Challenging Certainties, Joint History Textbooks as Magic Wands. Now, who has seen magic wands last? Probably last time in Harry Potter. I'm afraid there are none, but let's try to get close to that idea today. We're talking about miscellaneous projects, for lack of a better word, initiatives, major initiatives in some cases as well. Let me very briefly tell you about the structure of the upcoming 90 minutes here today. So I'll give you a very brief intro into the context, and context in this case is why are we doing that? Why is it that IDM originally said, oh, let's talk about that. That's interesting. We're gonna talk about. I'll introduce you participants briefly, obviously as well, which is part of the reasoning why we are doing that as well. It's you bringing in your competence and know-how and horizon that will make this interesting. Second part, the more individual flow. So what angle is each of you tackling, bringing in here? I think we have three wonderful angles from different countries, to say the least, also from angles. And I will not give away the sort of like the very definition of angles at this point. We'll have something like the bigger picture, which is probably the third part of this. If you want to be very blunt, the bigger picture in this respect I see as content, money, and politics, and probably also authorization, which is an important element coming into that. We'll conclude probably with best practices, with the idea of having disagreed on something or agreed on something or having heard of something new and learned something. I'll try to make it on time at 2:30. Now, very brief from my side. I suppose one can say that I'm a history buff. So yeah, studied it, liked it, followed it. I've been working in Central and Southeastern Europe since years, and I've always been confronted with different understandings of historical narratives of history, to say it like that. And every now and then it was when someone said, let's, what is really needed is away from national, going to transnational history textbooks. That would really change the whole picture. Wow, that's the kind of magic wand I had in mind when giving the title. The magic wand, history textbooks. And then journalists writing about it. Dare I say, people in general are amazed. They're like, oh, that sounds like a really good idea. Why have we never tried that before? Let's go for it. Yeah, that's really good. And then there's excitement and a long work process, best case, about to start. So I have heard of a couple of joint history textbook projects. And this one, the one that triggered it, is an upcoming publication called History Teaching as a Common European Challenge, Southeast European Response through the Joint History Project. Date is given from 1999 to 2019. It's quite some lifespan for a project, and which is why I then contacted Professor Christina Koulouri, who is joining us today. So the absolutely distinguished academic career. I was wondering whether I should name all universities you have been teaching at. That's impressive. The long academic career had also a deep dive into this joint history textbook, and which is why we are talking today. And I look forward to hearing more about this from Professor Koulouri, from Christina. Dare I say, are we on first name basis on this panel? I suppose we are. Yeah, thanks. The joint history textbook serving as the door opener to this discussion, to this panel, is fine, and I soon realized this is again in Central Southeastern Europe. Why don't we try to open it up? And this is where now we are talking about the angles. This is where Sofia Guimaraes from Rector comes in. School director, school founder, among many other things. Also active in a entrepreneurship in a say, business group, I suppose, in Brazil, entailing many different branches, including private schools, including publishing houses, including the very capacity to publish their own history textbooks in a Brazilian context. And fantastic to have this perspective in this panel as well. And I give room to all of you to present yourselves in better words if you would like to. Very recent, very up to date, and very much of my liking. Professor Konkulewski, sorry. The Polish-German school book, Polish-German textbook, recently published. At a time when there might be political differences between Poland and Germany too much in the foreground, comes a publication of a year-long endeavor to go live 30 years after the Polish-German Nachbarschaftsvertrag, contract for good neighborly relationship. Professor Konkulewski, also a very distinguished career in academia, London, Mainz, Wisconsin, and most recently director of the Center for Historical Research, Polish Academy of Science in Berlin. So, if you ever have a question, if one of you or in the audience you have a question, I suppose this is the very panel that can answer questions regarding transnational history textbooks. I can see who is joining us. I can see names of people in the audience. There's interesting colleagues, there's interesting people who also have contributed to individual projects, in this case, to a very high extent. But I'll start from here. One last quick technical announcement. The audience, if you have questions or a question, please use the Q&A button of Zoom. That makes it easier to see, and I'll see whether it fits and try to address it to the audience. I think 15 minutes into the talk, it's nonsense to say, without further ado, we are already in the very middle of it. Christina, may I please ask you to enlighten us on where you are right now, what you are working on, what you would like to say to this debate.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Thank you for this invitation. Hello, everybody. Well, at this moment, I am in Athens. I am in my office. It is the Rector's office at Panteion University of Social and Political Sciences. And it is a very warm day, a very hot day in Athens today. Well, I am a historian, specialized in the 19th century, what we call the long 19th century, from the French Revolution to the Second World War, to the interwar period. I have been working on questions of nationalism and national identity, history textbooks, analysis of history textbooks, as a historian, I mean. Also, my recent book is on memory studies. It is about historical memory and national identity in Greece during the first century of independence from 1830 to 1930. And as you mentioned, a large part of my work as a historian has been devoted to the Joint History Project, which I had the honor. I had the honor to chair the History Education Committee of the Center for Democracy and Reconciliation in Southeast Europe from 1999 to 2016, in this capacity, I coordinated many seminars, workshops, and of course, the publication of 6 volumes. I'm going to talk about them, I suppose, in the second part. 6 volumes of Balkan history, of the Southeastern Europe from the 14th century to date, or to be more precise, to 2008. So I am very glad I have the opportunity to present this, I think, very successful and challenging project to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're wetting our mouths, so to say. I'm looking forward to that, obviously. Sofia, please bring us into the picture.
Just a second. Yes.
A brief introduction, where you are, what you are currently working on.
No, I come from Brazil, and I currently live in Vienna. For the past 12 years, I've been in Vienna. In Brazil, I was a school director, book author. I developed educational software. I've done everything that can be done in a private context, in the private school context in Brazil. Now I am, I also worked, not only, but also worked in the school that my father founded together with his partners. And now I'm one of the new partners of that school, which my brother is the CEO. And schools have CEOs. Because it's a bigger operation. It's a larger system that evolved around the school. And private schools in Brazil, they have a history of being very important, especially since the dictatorship in the 60s, the military dictatorship, where the public schools, they suffered a lot because they were really left aside by the government, because they were not really interested in forming critical thinking in Brazil. And so the people took it in their own hands to develop schools further. And then there were a succession of economic crises that kind of left the whole area a little bit not in a very nice situation. I used to work a lot in teacher training, teacher development. And as you know, Brazil is a huge country. We have 26 or 27, I never know, because it changes. It changed while I was after I left school. So those are the things like the map of Europe. It's all very, very new to everybody. But I think I'm pretty sure it's 26 different states. And each of these states have a different history. And Brazil has 220 million people living in it. If you go from north to south, Brazil is like the distance between Lisbon and Moscow. So it's a continent in itself. with these 27 states, that you could analyze them as different countries, as we are. But that's where I come from, and that's basically my experience. And it's lovely and we have a very special situation regarding history that I can share with you later. But that's basically what I have to say about myself and where I come from. I hope that was okay, Robin.
Very much so. Again, looking forward to hearing more about that. This is the tour de table. As are people in French still saying that? Not sure. Igor, please bring us into your picture.
Okay, so I'm a historian, and mainly I do the early modern periods of history, European history from the 16th until the 18th century. Though I was also involved not only in scholarship, but also in museology. So I contributed to two quite important projects in Poland, namely to the core exhibition of the Jewish Museum in Warsaw, and to the exhibition of the Museum for Polish History. The works on this last exhibition are still underway, and hopefully next year the core exhibition at the Museum of Polish History will be opened. I'd like to mention it because I think that museology, and especially museum education, plays quite important role in teaching history today. As far as the project I'm going to talk today about is concerned, so the project of the Polish-German textbook for history, since 2012 I've been scholarly coordinator on the Polish side of this project, and together with my German colleague in the same capacity, Professor Eckhard Fuchs, the director of the Georg Eckert Institut für internationale Schulbuchforschung, we've implemented or carried out this project, which officially was closed last year when volume 4 of our book series, Polish-German book textbook series, Europe, Our History, came out.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, allow me to again bring you together. So now we are, I suppose we are all amazed by the idea of history textbooks and probably writing them, reading them, using them, if I can say so. And we probably see the importance, or we connect a certain importance with it. I wasn't there when she said it, but apparently Dubravka Stojanovic from Belgrade, a Serbian historian, said history textbooks can be a pre-military training. What a horrible perspective that entails. There's an understanding, at least within the European Union, that history textbooks contribute to say building of national, but also of a European identity within this context of many cultures that we have. Christina, please, the joint history textbook success. Where is it right now?
Do you want me to make first the presentation, or
Yes,
and then have take the questions and the discussion, or start with the discussion? Because the question whether it was a success or not is in the end of the presentation, of course.
Yeah, that's the point. So the say the idea would be to now hear from each three of you a little bit more, say, flesh to this story. Christina, Igor, presenting each your say like projects. I dislike the word project. Sorry, if you come up with a better one, endeavors or probably missions. And Sofia, And Sofia, you give examples from Brazil and the many history textbooks you have been publishing there. Okay, same order, Christina, Sofia, Igor. Would that work? And then we open the floor not only amongst ourselves but also to the audience.
Okay, so can I share my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I think
I can see it better.
Yeah. Okay, I will be brief because you know it's very difficult to present 20 years of work in 10 minutes. So I will try to be brief. So this is the History Education Committee, which coordinated this very ambitious and, in my opinion, successful project. It was a joint history project. It was a project. So you can see that Dubravka Stojanovic that you mentioned was actually the vice chair of this committee. And you can see from the names, 13 countries were represented on this board, covering the whole map of Southeast Europe, from Slovenia to Cyprus. So it was not just what we are used today to call the Western Balkans or former Yugoslavia, but also Turkey, Greece, Cyprus, Romania, Bulgaria. So what were our main principles? What was our method? There were, in the past, already since the interwar period, there was this idea that we need to use a kind of common textbook or a common narrative about our history to overcome national hatred and to overcome nationalism, which actually leads to war. So the experience of the two world wars in the 20th century gave us a good lesson how to avoid. Maybe should we revise history teaching? So first of all, we were talking about a Balkan shared history, which would of course identify cultural similarities and interactions, but without concealing interethnic conflicts. We didn't want to create a fake and harmonious picture of the past, because you know, our history is also about conflict, war, hatred. So we need to find a method, a pedagogical method, to teach students about also this dark side of our history. Second, Balkan history is not a Sonderweg, a kind of, you know, particular history, but it is part of European and world history. This is how we decided to present, to write about it, and to teach it. Third, history is not taught from an ethnocentric perspective, but through a comparative and multi-perspective approach. Multi-perspectivity is a key word in our approach to history teaching. And fourth point, regional history is not conceived as a harmonious linear process, but as a synthesis of coexistence and conflicts. This is what I mentioned previously. This is history. It is more complex. You know, myth is simple. It's about black and white, bad and good guys. But history is very complex, and it is difficult to show to people how complex it can be. And we need to give an interpretation of this complex past. History teaching can be convincing and effective only if it integrates traumatic memories and if it responds to experiences of conflict too. Trauma is another keyword, because in the present societies, social groups bring with them traumatic memories. So the main challenge is how to deal with these traumatic memories in the classroom. These were the first books that we published, they are not textbooks. We started by recording, by analyzing the situation in all the countries. If we are about to change, to revise history teaching, we need first to know what is taught, how it is taught, what the curricula are. As I mentioned, we have a very complex map of 13 countries and different educational systems. So we first prepared these publications to analyze the state of the art. Then, in 2 phases, we edited these 6 volumes. The first 4, the Ottoman Empire, nation and states in Southeast Europe, the Balkan Wars, and the Second World War, were published in English in 2005. And then they were translated in many languages, as I will show later. And in 2016, the 2 last volumes were published, The Cold War and Wars, Divisions, Integration, 1990-2008. This second volume, or 6th volume, is mainly about the wars in Yugoslavia, a topic which is very hot and very a burning topic that is not taught in the classroom. So we were brave enough to say, no, there is nothing that a historian cannot talk about. We are going to teach also the Yugoslav Wars. And you can see some of the translations. They were translated also into Japanese, the first 4 volumes, and now a Japanese translation edition of the 2 last volumes is also underway. So the teaching method, as I said, 1, 2, 3. Multi-perspectivity is the first pillar. To compare not only different sources, because we think that multi-perspectivity is just to juxtapose a source from Germany, a source from Poland, a source from Greece, a source from Turkey. This is not multi-perspectivity. Multi-perspectivity is to compare also different interpretations of the sources, because this is where the game lies. The second is to challenge the truth of national history and to develop tolerance and a pluralistic historical identity. Historical identity is mainly national, exclusive identity. We wanted actually to develop an inclusive national identity. Empathy is the second pillar. Empathy means to be into the other's shoes in order to better understand the experience of the victims and of the defeated. Empathy does not mean passive and unmediated identification with the victims. This is also a very, very sensitive topic. How to deal with the victims in what does empathy with the victims mean? We can discuss this. And source analysis, the workbooks that we produced are not traditional textbooks, I mean a narrative, but collections of historical sources which can be used in parallel with the existing teachers' textbooks. So they are materials. Talking about the Yugoslav Wars, I have just some examples and some pages. I will be very brief. You can see the contents, the summary of Chapter 2, the Disintegration of Yugoslavia, a combination of chronological and thematic approach, the war itself, human experience in war conditions, to present the dark face of the war, and also present the anti-war movement, to show that not unanimously societies were backing the war, that not all the citizens were in favor of the war, because this is a fictitious image which is transmitted through national history, that war is something inevitable and something that everybody wants to happen. So you can see here some pages from the chapter on the siege of Sarajevo. You can see the posters, you can see the variety of the sources that we use, a short introduction, different sources, then the different experiences of refugee-dom refugees, Muslim refugees, Serbian refugees, Croat refugees. So to show somehow the human experience of being a refugee, and also the destruction of cultural heritage. This is the so-called cultural cleansing. also has all these aspects, from Orthodox churches to Dubrovnik, and from Dubrovnik to mosques. And finally, the challenges. And I will finish with this slide. First, there was a practical challenge, and I am speaking here in my capacity as the general coordinator. Coordinating 100 historians from 13 countries is a big challenge per se. It is, and I think that it was really a big achievement that although there were so many historians working, we didn't have actually a fight. We had disagreements, we had debates, but we didn't have a fight because we were professional historians and we respected each other. We respected professionalism. We respected a historian who brought the sources, and then we could discuss on something which was really documentation. Translation of original, the second challenge, how to translate original sources from 9 languages into English, from Albanian, from Greek, from Serbian. Historical sources are not easy texts because you had a different language. Different languages is used in the 14th century or in the 16th century. We know it quite well. It's very difficult to convey a translation today. And visual materials, of course, it was very difficult for previous centuries. Lack of bibliography of all the countries. We know that historical studies have not been developed in the same rhythm in all the countries. So we didn't have the same level of development of historiography. So we had a lack of bibliography in many of the countries, not in all of the countries, and especially on recent history. I mean, we didn't have bibliography on the 90s. Structure of the volumes and selection of the documents, a big challenge, and the question of representativeness. Everybody wants to see her country in the book. How many pages Albania has, how many pages Greece has. So there was this kind of representativeness, which was quantitative. You understand? But yes. So, but we managed somehow to overcome this. This was a fight about representativeness and the reactions in societies. Here, we had some history wars in different countries. There were reactions mainly by nationalist circles, because they were thinking that this kind of transnational history was attacking national identity. And we, who were part of this project, had to defend ourselves in public, on TV, in the newspapers. So there we can discuss about the reception of this kind of textbooks in societies which are overwhelmed by nationalism. Teachers training. How can a teacher be able to use such an innovative material? They are more or less traditional historians. They are not trained to use this kind of transnational materials. So another challenge was, and we actually organized a series of teacher training workshops. And finally, what else? Ministries of Education and governments, political authorities were not favorable in this kind of material. Some were, others not. So again, here we have to discuss, because without authorization, we cannot, these textbooks cannot enter the classroom. We need the authorization by the Ministries of Education and the governments. And this is another issue that we can discuss. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Wonderful. Christina, there's already a question for you, which if Herr Lütke now allows, I will save up for a little bit later. I'll keep it in mind. Sofia, ministries of education, the very need to bring together historians, well, the wish to bring together historians, so many, coordinating them, coming out with a result that is that is politically discussed and debated. What were the reasons for you to say do your own history textbooks, and are those challenges just described in a one nation context applicable? Tell us a little bit about probably where your father started and why, and where at which, say, volume you are right now.
Okay. We don't really have volumes. We rewrite and relaunch school books according to market needs. We have a very different approach towards publishing than Christina has. Christina it's a wonderful job what you're doing. Congratulations. It looks really like excellent, exquisite material. And what I think that what I can chip in this discussion is the fact that Brazil in itself, for being so large, we have customs, and we have, especially for smaller children, which is a very important thing. People in the north of Brazil, they look different, they speak different, they eat different things. The whole cultural, they have been different colonized. It's an old colony of Portugal, and in the north of Brazil, you have a certain kind of origin for the people who populate Brazil, and this has generated a great diversity within the country. And of course, the history of Brazil extends. It was started to be colonized in 1500. Exactly 1500, when Portugal officially discovered Brazil, and but it really started to evolve as a country in 1808, when Napoleon expelled the King of Portugal, and he went to Brazil and moved the head of the government to Rio. And from then on, which means we are a very, very young country. We're 200 and something years old, but lots has happened. And lots has happened in very isolated places. And the things that happened in the north of Brazil, like, I don't know, the rubber cycle, in the middle of the Amazon, and the things that happened in the south of Brazil, which was a very warring, very violent land in the border of Argentina and Paraguay, and many different things happened. They are not so meaningful for the children. And because of that, well, let me just start on how I came to the business. When I was born, exactly in the year I was born, my father founded a school, a private school, and the school grew, and it became one of one of the most well-viewed, one of the most liberal, most tolerant schools in our state, which is one of the southern states of Brazil. And lots of people came to the school and said, oh, this is such a great school. I would like to be more like you. And from there, he started to provide teacher training to other schools and to sell his own materials, because we always wrote our own materials, because the teachers had very special ways of teaching, and they were all very progressive teachers, and they were not really up to it. This was in the middle of the dictatorship of you know, that there was a huge military dictatorship in South America in the 60s, because Cold War, Papa, you probably know that. And so they decided to write their own school books. And it's a lie school, which means we do not have religion, and this is possible in Brazil because Brazil is very progressive in that area. And so they started to write books, and this has developed to such an extent that we were present in all of the states in Brazil. We reached over 1 million students at some point, and then now we have divided the companies differently, but we attended all these different states of Brazil. And for that to happen, we had to adapt our books to the different areas of this country, because nobody wanted to know about the history of the wars in the southern states, in the northern states. They mentioned it, but it was a few lines. Like And if we had to write one history of Brazil, we would have the same discussion you had, Christina, with the Albanians, of how many times Albania is going to be mentioned and how important it is, this war compared to that war. And so to avoid that kind of fight, what we decided was to write specific areas of the books which were going to be published only in a certain area of the country. So every time we went to a different state, we had to go to the state. We hired a good teacher who became an author, and she would bring us about the up to date with the history of that state and how the state liked to see the history. We always try. We have always been 100% independent. We pay taxes just like the cigarette shop around the corner in Brazil for a private school. You're not doing anything for. They don't see you as a company that's doing something for the improvement of society. They see you as just a regular business. And my father, when he gave us the company, he retired, and he said, there are much easier ways to make money, my dear. This is not a good way. But it's the way we know how to work, and it's the way we believe is the right way. And so we adapted our school books. We kept a general Brazilian history, which is a critical history, because also our recent history is very conflicted with it's not a little bit about nationalism, but it's mostly about political extremism, which is still an inheritance from our dictatorships, and which were not as bad, fortunately, as the rest of South America. It is very important that we have a main critical history of Brazil, as you are trying to make a main critical history, tolerant, looking from different perspectives of Central Eastern Europe. But also we cherish, and we know that because we are a private company and we are selling our materials to customers, and it is expensive, and it's, of course, it's very good material, but they want to have what they need and what their customers want, because the children, you know, there are places in the north of Brazil where the children every year in May, they get painted and they dress up differently, and they have to do this party. And so they need to have this celebrated also in their history books. Why do they celebrate this? And this is a part of the culture, and they cannot have just, you know, depending that the teachers in Brazil are unfortunately still very badly paid, and they're the teacher training in Brazil in the universities is still suffering effects from the dictatorship, because most universities are federal universities. They are public universities, especially those courses. And so the education of teachers is not really something which is excellent in Brazil yet. And that's why we have such a big market, because we also provide education for the teachers and training. And so we you know, we cannot rely on the level of the teachers that they are going to be great and well educated enough to create their own materials and to just have a general textbook, and that they adapt themselves for the individual states and histories and regions, regional history, I could call it. And so yeah, that's how it developed, that we came to make the books. They're interlinked. They're not. It's not that you have a separate book for regional history. They are in between the history, not only chronologically but also thematically. They are interlinked. The regional histories together, and that one changes according to where this book is going to, and that's, I think, the interesting aspect, that we do not have the quantitative debate, because they have free hand to go for their own history, as long as it's, of course, in the principles of tolerance, of multi-perspectives, and if there are war between two states, that each state can state their own place. And normally this is treated as a common topic. And yeah, the multi-perspective thing that you mentioned is of course essential nowadays. I think this gives more or less an idea of what I'm doing here and why I thought it would be interesting to show what we do in Brazil. Thank you very much, Robin. Was that okay?
Yes. There's one aspect which I would like to repeat. You're selling history textbooks, full stop. You're selling them, and you wouldn't sell them if it wouldn't be profit. So that's I believe is an aspect one should keep in mind as well.
Yeah, no, of course, and selling books is much more profitable than teaching because we have schools and this was a way of basically keeping the schools viable, because schools are expensive, and when you sell books, you produce the book once and then you can sell it several times, and so you can have more profit than in a school, but the school itself kind of depends on the sale of books so that it can happen at the quality we have.
About how many schools are we talking in Brazil?
We have sold our publishing house to another big group, but when we sold the publishing house, we were, I think, in over. I just opened this because we were at over 700,000 or 800,000 students and 44,000 teachers that we were training, and I don't want to tell you that I'm very bad with numbers.
The size of smaller companies.
Yeah, but there are many thousands of schools involved in this venture. I'm not going to tell you because I don't know. I know we still have our own schools which used to work and still do work as a showroom for our books, because the people come, they see the school, they say, wow, we want that, and how can I have that? And then we help them build something similar through our training.
Thanks for giving us this perspective. And Igor, when we heard Sofia and Christina and 27 states within one nation in Brazil, several involved countries in the joint history textbooks, was it a piece of cake for you? I mean, talking about representativeness, Polish, 50-50.
Yeah, actually, this term "piece of cake" crossed my mind while listening.
I'm sure it was not.
It was not, but still, it crossed my mind, especially listening to both of your projects you are implementing. And when Christina mentioned about the problems with translation into 9 different languages, then I thought, wow, in comparison with our Polish-German project, it seems to be much more complicated. Okay, but let me present some. I'm trying to share the screen now with you, just to present some of the most important features, characteristics, but also compositional features of our textbook. So the German textbook called Europe Our History. And I think that the most important thing to mention in this context is that the goal of the Polish-German project was the publication of a series of school history textbooks addressed to students in the age between 11 and 15 years old. So students at middle and grammar schools. And I think that this is one of the differences between our two projects. So the South European and the Polish German textbook project. Secondly, the textbooks in Polish and German language versions were to be identical in terms of their content and graphic design, and this is again something which is similar to the South European project. It is important to note that our German-Polish project was and is not concerned with producing auxiliary teaching materials, but it aims at the creation of a state-approved history textbook compliant with both countries' curricula, or to be more specific, compliant with the Polish curriculum and 16 to 12 other curricula in respectively in 16 German Bundesländer or regions. The result of our project is a 4-volume textbook series called Europe, Our History, which was published between 2016, at that point came out volume 1, and volume 4 appeared 2020, so 1 year ago. What is important that our textbook series do not focus only on the history of Poland and Germany or history of Polish-German relations, but it presents the history of both countries in a broad context of European and world history, global history, if you like, and it covers all periods of history, from the prehistory until the beginning of the 21st century. And perhaps it would be interesting, especially for Christina, ancient Greek history that became a subject of a huge controversy, how to depict, especially the second Persian war in our Polish-German textbook. And perhaps later I can come back to this quite interesting controversy, which was mostly about the different cultures of memory in Poland and Germany in relation to this event from the ancient Greek history. Now, both textbook graphic design and the proportions of 50% main text and 50% illustrations and didactic content, such as exercises, tests, and recurring boxes, constitute important characteristics of the Polish-German textbook for history. And this is quite revolutionary, I have to say, in relation to the didactic tradition in Poland, where still about 90% or between 80 and 90% of the main text is a text authored by the authors of the national, written by the authors of the national textbooks, and didactic elements remained within the scope between 10 and 20%. Important elements of the content and layout are the timeline and the rubric called at the same time in Europe, which present in a sketchy form similar events and historical phenomena in a broader European context to those discussed in detail in a specific chapter. They also show how much history of particular regions and countries in Europe is connected with each other, but also to what extent history of European continent is complex and combined with history of other continents. We tried to present many topics in our transnational textbook as a uniting human experience and to present them as much as possible from a perspective of children. So in volume 4, which covers the history of the so-called difficult 20th century, the Holocaust was presented according to the concept of an Austro-American psychiatrist, Viktor Frankl, as a uniting human experience in extremity, providing universal truths for all humans. In other chapters on World War II, we included also extensive fragments from primary sources written by children or iconographic sources presenting Jewish children in the ghettos to make the narrative of the textbook more meaningful for young people today. Another important compositional feature of our textbook is a recurring section which will be could be translated into English as thinking and questioning like a historian, including questions leading from a basic level of understanding to the mastery of a content and from lower to higher order thinking skills by a short explanation of the methods used by historians analyzing primary and secondary historical sources, including artifacts commemorating the past or featured films. Here we, on this slide, I choose 2 examples of that, and we are presenting here on one page the history of the Marine Corps War Memorial in Arlington in the US, asking questions with regard to its genesis and message, and on the other page we present an analysis of 2 acclaimed movies, Life is Beautiful, a comedy drama directed by and starring Roberto Benigni from 1997, and The Pianist, a war biographical drama film produced and directed by Roman Polanski in 2002. Also, the section called Past in the Present demonstrates different phenomena or events from the more and less remote past that have remained relevant in our contemporary everyday life, culture, and language. It presents also different aspects of a many-generational so-called cultural memory and different strategies of commemoration, or on the other hand, also a shorter one-generation memory. So on this slide, you can see on the one hand different forms of commemoration of the Holocaust. So the monument of the so-called empty shoes on the bank of River of Danube in Budapest, the Hall of Names in Yad Vashem, the so-called Stolpersteine or stumbling stones in German towns, and the Belzec commemoration place on the area of the former Nazi German annihilation camp. Besides, in the section past, in the present, we also try to present personal stories and experiences of average people from World War II, in this case, having an impact on lives of people until today. So on the other page, you can see again the same section in which we present a story of a Belarusian girl who was a forced worker, Zwangsarbeiterin, working in her teens during World War II in Nazi Germany. The section past and present should, among others, prove that history lasts in the lives of individuals as well as in the contemporary public space and landscape that surround us. Another example of recurring box or section is the rubric called Points of View, which includes different opinions and interpretations. Christina, it was so important in your talk. So different opinions and interpretations by historians or public intellectuals from various countries or from the same country related to the same historical event, process, or a person involved in it. Here, two examples, two opinions, one expressed by a German historian, Stefan Leinstedt, in his book, The Candace Holocaust, and the opinion of a former German president, Richard von Weizsäcker, in his speech in the German parliament in 1985, both on the problem how much average Germans knew about the Holocaust during World War II. Due to juxtaposing two opinions or interpretations on the same topic, we can see different ways used by a historian on the one hand, and on the other hand, a politician to talk about the responsibility for the Holocaust. And in this way, editors and authors of the post-German textbook were able to teach history based on the so-called multi-perspective approach. The main goal of this approach, I would repeat it and stress it again, is to convince students at school, but also their teachers, that the main goal of history is not only to present facts how they really happened in the abstract past that is disconnected from the present day. We try to prove that history is also a kind of a narrative that might be told in many different ways. And this seems to be one of the most important messages for each project of a transnational history textbook. Well, that's it from me.
Thank you very much, Igor. I'll immediately pick up this one. I would call it keyword narrative, historical narratives, history narratives. We'll come now to the, let's call it bigger picture, or bigger angle. I quoted the historian from Belgrade earlier, who sheds light on potential dangers and probably also opportunities that come and go with history textbooks. Now, content, money, politics. What role do governments play in all of that? What is the expectation of governments when they support a joint transnational history textbook? Probably, Igor, in your case, what do you think were the expectations? Christina, I like to call it, I like to use this biblical word for the genesis of the joint history textbook was not one that came from originally governments, quite the contrary. It came from private individuals having a strong opinion on that and bringing together such know-how and academic excellence. And again, the business angle. So what happens to the business angle if governments are involved? Are those two different worlds? Probably, Igor, yours is sort of the most recent. Tell us briefly, please. It was the two governments agreeing, first of all, and the very idea came from, say, high-level meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the first inspiration that came up in 2006 on the part of the former foreign minister of Germany, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, who is now president of Germany. And shortly after the presentation of a first transnational textbook for history in Europe, so the Franco-German textbook called Geschichte, Histoire, Frank-Walter Steinmeier suggested a similar project between Poland and Germany. At the very first moment, it seemed to be an utopian idea. But 2 years later, 2008, the Polish foreign minister, Władysław Sikorski, took up this idea, and since then, the project officially started. In the project were involved political groups representing 3 ministries on the Polish side, among others, the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and more or less the same kind of ministries was represented on the German side. And also the joint Polish-German Commission played quite important role, because the representatives of the Polish-German Joint Commission actually were charged with the task to work out main principles, main assumptions, recommendations for the textbook. And it was actually the starting point, 2010, when these recommendations came out after 2 years of discussions on both sides. And then, well, we needed to find commercial publishers in both countries. So 2012, eventually, we found quite big publishing house in Poland, based in Warsaw, and a smaller but very active publishing house in Germany, based in Wiesbaden. And since then started actually work of the authors, of the editors on the project. The project was financed similarly like a Franco-German project, on equal basis by 2 governments, with some ups and downs. And amazingly, please understand me correctly. Actually, this process was pushed first by people of goodwill on the Polish side, at the Ministry of Education, who were connected with the liberal government we used to have before 2016. But the way was not so easy, because our project, the financing of our project, was dependent on some high-ranked officials who represented the liberal camp in Poland, but they were not so supportive for our project. And then, amazingly, the conservative government, who was elected in 2016, in a very stable way started supporting our project. Well, this is quite amazing, as I'm saying, but we got finances actually from the governments of our both countries on an equal basis. And another thing is the authorization. So on the Polish side,
Igor, a brief one on that one, please, on the authorization.
Okay, 30 reviews. Okay.
All of you, please.
Okay, 30 reviews were produced during the approval procedures in Warsaw at the Ministry of Education. About 60 were produced in the Bundesländer in Germany for our textbook series. So a huge amount of work, not only for us, but also for the reviewers and officials at the
if I may jump in here, or if I may interrupt you, when I did did research on the Polish-German textbook, this was already considered so far the biggest success, that the German Bundesländer could agree on it. I wonder whether that's already the one success you wanna. I mean, there needs to be other successes as well. For example, applicability and teachers in classrooms using it. And Sofia, and all of you, please feel free to interfere and ask questions. I'll also try to read out the questions from the audience. Sofia, you're doing it on yourself, on your own. Have you been, allow me to be frank, but have you been criticized for, say, lack of public control or so? I mean, basically, could you put into the textbook whatever you like?
No, of course not. We have a general curriculum in Brazil, as every country also has, and it's just how do you describe it? It's just the political aspect that, you know, we are strong believers of non-radicalism. We think that all viewpoints have to be, and Brazil is a very radicalized country, unfortunately, like the whole world. Yeah, nowadays you have extremists everywhere, and the people who are trying to meet in the middle, they are lacking in Brazil, because they are seen as weak, as you know, condescending, that they don't stand their ground for what their beliefs. And this was a kind of a fissure in society that was mainly caused by an inheritance we have from the dictatorship and from the economical crisis in the 70s and 80s, and with this big difference between rich and poor, which reigns in Brazil, and we have of course been criticized by the left, because they think we are too capitalistic, and we are teaching the children how, you know, that they need to make money, and that's okay. And we're criticized by the right because we are too liberal, and we think that we don't do we are not sexist, we are very tolerant, we are for free choice of religion, and so there is nobody's very satisfied with us. but this is the way things go, you know. If you want to appeal to a broad-minded audience, that's what you have to do. You have to pay the price, and there is an incredible amount of extreme conservatives in Brazil. The present government is very conservative. They're very religious, not in the form we see here. In the Catholic Church is mild compared to what happens in Brazil. There are lots of sects and lots of it's very a very different scenario, very complicated scenario in those terms. Yeah, we're there to be criticized. That's part of the job, isn't it? and we teach them that there are people there are right things in both sides. You just need to know pick and choose, and that's basically the game in history, is to teach not only history but in all sorts of areas of knowledge where a bit of ideology comes in. Children and students in general, they have to learn to decide what's good for them, and then to respect what they don't agree with, and that's basically how we deal with things.
Thank you. Yes. Would anyone like to directly respond? Otherwise, I'll continue.
I would like to add something about the market and all these the very interesting questions. Our books were not on the market because they were part of a project funded by the EU, so they were distributed for free to teachers. There was, apart from the German-Polish textbook, there was also a German-French textbook published, and it was not a success It was a success because it was published, but it was not a success because it was not sold finally. So it is a big challenge there, whether something that you create with very goodwill and everything, if it is going to be sold, because societies are conservative, not only governments, if I may say. So it is a risk for publishing houses to invest in these projects. So I don't know. So it is important also to see how much percent of the market a book, a specific transnational textbook receives. So this is another, I think, parameter that we have to take into account. And the example of the French-German is such an example. The same is in the Balkans, in Southeast Europe, because if you are going to publish such a book, I think teachers are not going to choose it. So our decision actually was, as you said, a decision taken by civil society itself, by historians, and also the CDRC, which was actually an NGO, okay, so created by businessmen from the region. So it was something that we said, the first criticism was that, why are you doing this? Societies are not ready yet. So, and the answer is, if we are going to wait for societies to be ready, then we will never do it. So we use this as a tool of change. So this is, we do it to transform society, to transform education. We don't wait for education society to be transformed before producing this kind of materials and textbooks. So this, sorry, I don't want, maybe we want to take some questions. I see there are some questions from the audience.
Yeah, I think we can. I mean, the questions are specific. This is why I was waiting to post them. Stefan Lütgenau, sorry, I'll jump over yours and come to David Schriffel's question, which is a little bit more general. Now, the involvement of ministries of foreign affairs. We heard a little bit about your Igor, about your experiences with it. Sofia, I suppose you don't have to do with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I suppose, and then Christina, it was more like national ministries of education you had to quarrel with, I suppose. Who was, if I may ask, who was totally backing it? Can you say, like, talking about bluntly about countries, can you say there was country XYZ very much in favor, and another one, you don't have to say which one, and another one very much blocking it? Are we talking about national interest?
The question, I will rephrase your question.
Yeah.
The question is why some countries were backing it. So if you answer this question, then because you think that because you ask the question because you think, and this is something, a wrong suggestion, is that some countries are backing it because they are more tolerant or whatever. This is wrong. They're backing it because of international relations. When there is a small country, like Kosovo, for example, which wants to receive international recognition, then it has to obey to some standards. And because they want to access NATO, they want to join the EU, etc. So I'm not going to say which countries, but some countries were backing the project, although the ministries of education and the governments were not believing in it at all, because it was one of the conditions for them to show that they were European.
Yeah, the price you have to pay.
Exactly.
Yeah, conditionality, pros and cons. I understand. Also, question. Yeah, sorry, Igor. Yeah.
Well, perhaps Yeah, I can imagine, the more so that we had also some experience with Kosovars. So with the teachers of history from Kosovo, and we were trying to reach out with our textbook and our experiences also to the Kosovo, and this is the product. So a text, handbook for teaching the Holocaust, actually. And it was a wonderful experience just to get in touch with the West the Balkans and all the problems the teachers in Kosovo are coping with. But perhaps I sound a bit idealistic. Yes, this is very important, and this is true what you said, Christina. But also I think that in our two projects, quite important component is the need for reconciliation. So, because as a matter of fact, our textbooks are the products, at least the Polish-German, are a product of a long-term process of the reconciliation between Poland and Germany. And I can imagine that also in the West of the Balkans, torn apart by the wars recently. Well, our textbook, sorry, I identify already with your project. So your textbook actually might be an instrument of the reconciliation between different countries. And this is also very important, isn't it? So reconciliation.
What about the governments? The question was not about the project itself. The project itself was conceived as a tool of reconciliation. And actually, we were quite successful, because I can tell you that there were historians from some countries, individuals, I mean, who have changed themselves during the project. Saying something different in 2001, and they were saying something different 10 years later. And they confessed that when I started, I was defensive, I was suspicious, and I was saying, what is this about? What about our identity? We had to defend our country, to defend our, our identity, etc. And by this, by participating in the project, I changed myself. And today I have to say they were not right. I'm not right, because I was listening to others being critical of their own national history, of their own national identity. And I was saying, why are they doing this and we are not doing this?
Christina, so, yes. Yeah, wonderful. Exactly the same experience. I started liking myself not being right. So just listening to other opinions and coming to the conclusion, no, my partners are actually right. May I bring something?
Igor, this is a very, very common experience, because actually, nations claim they are unique. But what is unique is that everybody shares the same idea about being unique.
Yeah, exactly. May I bring into discussion something else, something very important, because we are talking about projects in 3 cases of transnational or national textbook, which have the same narrative. But it must be mentioned in this context, another kind of transnational textbook. And I mean here the Israeli-Palestinian textbook for history to understand the narrative of the others, which was published 2003. And it has a completely different strategy of the narration. So it's limited only to the history of the 20th century, and the chapters on the same topic are written side by side, parallelly, once by an Israeli author and by a Palestinian author. So this is more like a report of divergences than a joint narrative. Nonetheless, it might be also very, very useful for what we referred to many times during our discussion, namely multi-perspective approach. And what is so interesting, the textbook, when it was the Israeli Palestine, when it was conceived at the very beginning, the concept was not only to have a double page, so in Hebrew and in Arabian, but also to have the third page, which would be positioned in the middle, and it would be a blank page for the readers to make their notes, to make their mind what version would they prefer, or of the history, Palestinian or Israeli, or to make their own statements on what they've read. So this is also quite important. We are not supposed, as authors or editors of transnational textbook, only to struggle for a joint narrative. Sometimes separate narratives, but brought together in one volume, might be also very, very important for the audience.
Yes, but if you have two countries, you cannot have 13 pages for one topic.
That's correct. How many pages in your case, in the
exactly.
in the case of
and
your
also
project?
the textbook that you mentioned was never used. It was rather an exercise, like the one, like as you described it. It was an exercise, it was created, but it was never used. And I think it is very difficult for such a textbook to be used if you have two different narratives. This is the basis to create a narrative, and this is multi-perspectivity. What you present and what we do is that we have also pieces of historiography from different countries, but also from the same country, because for example, in Greece there was a civil war, so you have two conflicting and controversial narratives on the civil war inside Greece, from the left side and from the right side. So there are so many narratives that you cannot really just juxtapose them, I think, as the final textbook, but as an intermediate stage, yes, I think it is useful.
Yep.
Thank you for that. Allow me the sort of last round of questions. Sofia, do you need a joint history textbook for Brazil? Do you now see that this seems to be not only the dominant but probably the better textbook version? And if not, why?
I think that what you're doing is amazing and it's wonderful. And unfortunately, it is, blood cells in publishing, and people want emotion. They want passion, yeah, and that's what they go for. And if you're selling to governments, basically, because even if it's the teacher down the road who chooses which textbook they're going to be using, they're not going to choose something that goes against their government perspective, because there is I don't want to be seen as that school that goes towards not towards the direction of the government, and so it is a very, very difficult situation to get these books printed, because what you would need to have an engaged, a very fearsome protector of your philosophy of teaching as a publishing house. And normally people who are very engaged, they have very radical views, and that's very difficult. And that's the thing. We are not in either left or right. We are trying to find a middle way, and this can only be successful because it's not very appealing. It's not very emotional appealing to people. It can only be successful if you have a strong hand of the market behind it. So you do marketing for that kind of thing, and of course we have a whole structure around it nowadays. If you see what happens with the media, with social media, how this polarization of society is happening because of social media. Wouldn't it be great if somebody got really engaged in social media to do the depolarization and to write this? This would probably be a job for the European Union, how to really make an European Union and sponsor you and give money to you so that you can do marketing about that with the schools, give training, give, you have to act as a marketing person. You have to give freebies. You have to, make promotions, do wonderful events and things. And the European Union does that. I remember I worked a lot when we started digitalizing schools in the 1990s. I worked a lot with several European Union projects, and they really invested into digitalization, which was actually not necessary because this just happened. But they really were, they were really looking forward to putting internet into the schools. And I took part in many events from the European Union for that. But yeah, we need to find people with passion for what you're doing, because what you're doing is the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do. It's to tell many perspectives, and yes, it's difficult, 13 perspectives, but maybe you can bring them down to 5, because some people might agree or agree in some aspects, and we need to end this dependence of the public school on the general direction of the government, the general ideology of the government, which is very sad, and our children, they suffer from it, unfortunately. And that's the beauty of private schools and all the private vouchers, where parents can choose which school they send their children to, and I see that there are very, very many people like you guys, and like my team and the people I work with in Brazil, who are fighting for more tolerance and for more acceptance of diversity, and that's what we have to do in education. We have to teach kids how to be more tolerant.
I strongly agree, and I also believe that private initiatives, private schools, private initiatives, probably also private money ideas, certainly projects can make a difference in educational systems of individual countries. There are good ideas that can change things in these structures that are perceived so hard to change for the better. And I was wondering whether history textbooks can become a new normal in this one. This would be the last question to all of you, because I know some of you also have other obligations and need to run. In, shall I say, 5 years or 10 years? What do you prefer? Where do you see transnational history textbooks in 10 years? Are we going away from individual projects here and there to a more general understanding and some expectation to have them?
Well, if I may, I would say if we keep Sofia longer in Europe, and her voice and her opinions would be heard by the European governments, then yes, we have a chance to extend our transnational textbook projects. Because you mentioned the role of the private schools, yes, it's very true. But you mentioned, also both of you, actually, digitalization. And I think that high technology is going to contribute to quite different formats of the transnational textbooks. So let me put it in this way: a bilateral Polish-German project or multilateral South European project might be immensely extended by elaborating them on internet, by giving additional lesson units just composed of different sources from different countries related to history of different countries on internet. So I think that one, for example, a bilateral textbook might be a core or a basis for expanding it into multilateral directions. It would be extremely important. Second, briefly, this is absolutely necessary to start a huge debate within the European Union on the public education, so joint public education, because this is not enough what we've got so far. So I hope that our projects may give some inspiration for such a huge debate, but our experiences, Franco-German, South of European, Polish German, should be starting points for this debate. So let's meet in a few months, I would say, perhaps next year, because we need to plan it financially, in Vienna at IDM. And we can discuss our strategies. The more so that
you are invited.
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. The more so that the Austro-Hungarian empire can provide us, and this is also quite important. We published even a volume on it. So on the education of history in one of the provinces, I would be glad to share with you my book, the data of it. So in the second half of the 19th century, by 1918, and we would be glad to expand this project to other provinces of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, because as a matter of fact, we can learn something from the education in this multicultural kind of empire which ceased to exist in 1918.
Yeah, but what, if I may, well, you mentioned something very important, Igor. Europe has to be convinced that such projects are necessary, because it seems that the EU reacts to different crises, but they never predict. And so they are not prepared for every new crisis. So we are here. This is an alarm that don't think that everything is settled, because they were alarmed when the war in the 90s or etc. But they said, oh, we did not expect. But we were saying that for decades. So we know that education is an investment that worth it, and we need to convince the EU officials and politicians in Europe that this is something that they have to invest in. So if we are going to meet, we need also political participation. Otherwise, we will be some romantics. I enjoy it very much, I have to confess, and I have many friends. I've met many more friends with that across Europe, and also in Japan, for example, or everywhere, now also in Brazil. But okay, this is not enough. We need something more. We need action. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I agree.
Thanks.
So let's meet in Vienna, and together with Robin, we will go forward. We will push forward.
Totally. So this panel being an alarm, and hopefully, and ideally contributing to raising this very topic where it also belongs. Sofia.
Yeah, no, just wanted to add one thing. By listening to you guys speak, it makes me think of something my history teacher used to say, that a country or a continent in this case that doesn't know its own history is doomed to repeat it. And that's, I think, what Europe has to perceive, that lots of bad things have happened, and unless people really come to terms with it, they will keep on happening. And that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, a wonderful conclusion. Yeah.
I thank you very much. I thank my three distinguished panelists. I thank the audience for tuning in, for listening, for looking. Let's all meet in Vienna and let's talk about it. Probably not online, probably real, and then streamed in a hybrid version to whoever is out there following this topic, which I believe will and hopefully will remain with us for quite some time. We need to come away from these little islands here and there to general understanding of how important this is. Thank you very much. I'll close this session for all of us now, and I wish you a good day and a good rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Nice to meet
you. And see you next year.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.